Take this, my son. It will keep you safe on your journey. I remember the day you received this. You were so proud. It reminds me of home.
Some regrets arrive loudly, crashing into life without warning. Others come quietly. They sit in the background, waiting. And by the time you notice them, it is already too late. He did not know it then, but he was standing at the most important crossroads of his life. On the surface, everything seemed normal. His days were full: work calls, deadlines, plans for the future. His phone was always in his hand, buzzing with things that felt urgent, important, necessary. Life was moving fast, and he was proud of keeping up with it. But somewhere behind all that noise was a memory that refused to fade. His mother's face. Not as she was when he was young and strong, but as she was in her final days. Tired eyes, a weak smile, hands that trembled slightly when she reached for his. She had looked at him with something he did not understand at the time: hope mixed with fear, love mixed with urgency. She had asked him for something. It was not a demand. It was not spoken in anger. It was simple, almost gentle. But the weight of it pressed against his chest the moment she said it. He felt it immediately: the discomfort, the pressure, the quiet warning that this was not something to ignore. Yet he did exactly that. He told himself it was not the right time. His life was complicated. He had responsibilities, stress, big plans. Surely she understood. She always did. He nodded. He avoided her eyes. He told himself he would come back to it later. Later never came. Even now, years afterward, he could not remember her exact words. But he remembered how they made him feel: trapped, uneasy, exposed. The kind of request that forces a person to stop running and face things buried deep inside. At the time, he chose comfort over courage. In her final days, he visited when he could, stayed for a while, left early. He noticed how thin she had become, how her strength faded a little more each time, but he refused to let the truth settle in. Accepting it felt like giving up. The room where she lay was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of breathing and ticking time. She watched him closely, as if memorizing his face, as if trying to say everything without words. Once more she brought up the request. This time her voice was weaker, slower. Each word seemed carefully chosen, as if she was afraid she might not get another chance. Her eyes searched his face, not demanding, hoping. And again he hesitated. He did not say no. He did not say yes. He did what felt easier in that moment. He delayed. He stood up. He told her he would take care of it. So he reassured himself that there was still time. Plenty of time. Then he left. Days later the call came. There was no warning. No chance to go back and fix things. Just a voice on the other end of the line, calm and final. His mother was gone. The world did not stop. Cars still moved. People still laughed. The sky looked the same. But inside him, something went completely silent. Her room felt empty in a way words could not explain. The air itself seemed heavier. And in that silence, her request returned, not spoken, not answered, but alive. Waiting. That was when the truth finally reached him. Some delays cost more than time. And some silences last forever. Long before regret learned his name, before silence filled the spaces where love once lived, there was a woman who built her life around one simple purpose: her son. When he was young, the world felt safe because she was in it. She woke up before the sun, even when sleep pulled at her bones. The house was always quiet at that hour, but she moved through it with care, as if even the walls deserved rest. By the time he opened his eyes, food was ready, clothes were clean, and worries were already hidden away. He never asked how tired she was. She never told him. When money was short, she found a way. When choices were hard, she chose him. She gave up small joys without complaint: new clothes, rest, dreams she once held close. Over time, those dreams faded, replaced by plans for his future instead. She celebrated his smallest wins like they were miracles. A good grade. A kind word from a teacher. a moment of confidence. She saw greatness in him long before he ever saw it in himself. When he failed, she did not scold him. She steadied him. When he felt weak, she became stronger. And when life pushed too hard, she stood between him and the pain as best she could. As he grew older, her sacrifices grew quieter. Teenage years came with impatience and pride. He wanted space, independence, answers that did not include her advice. She noticed the change but did not fight it. Instead, she stepped back, giving him room while staying close enough to catch him if he fell. Their conversations became shorter. Questions turned into statements. Listening turned into waiting for his turn to speak. Sometimes he spoke sharply. Sometimes he ignored her completely. She absorbed it all in silence. When he left home more often, she watched from the doorway, never asking him to stay. When calls became less frequent, she never complained. She told herself this was what growth looked like. This was love learning to let go. Even when her body began to weaken, she hid it well. She brushed off pain with a smile. She dismissed long nights of discomfort as nothing serious. Doctor visits were delayed. Rest was ignored. There was always something more important, him. Sometimes she tried to talk about things that weighed on her heart. Old memories, old mistakes, people she had lost touch with, words she wished she had spoken sooner. These moments came softly, usually when the house was quiet or the day was almost over. But he was often distracted. There was always somewhere to be. Something waiting. A life pulling him forward faster than she could follow. She noticed the distance growing even if he did not. She sensed time moving faster now, slipping through her fingers. She became more reflective, more careful with her words, as if she was preparing for something she could not name. And still she did not ask for much. She never demanded attention, never begged for time, never reminded him of what she had given up. All she wanted was peace, for him and for the parts of her life that remained unfinished. The request she would later make did not come from nowhere. It was built from years of quiet sacrifice, from things left unsaid, from love given freely without expectation of return. But he did not see that yet. To him she was still just there, steady, waiting, patient. He did not realize that even the strongest hands grow tired. And some hearts carry their hopes silently, until there is no time left to speak them aloud. Life did not pull them apart all at once. It happened slowly in small choices that seemed harmless at the time. His world began to grow wider. New goals, new pressures, new versions of himself that demanded more attention than the old ones. Success became something he chased with focus and pride. Every step forward felt earned, and every sacrifice felt justified. In that forward motion, his mother slowly faded into the background. Not because he stopped loving her, but because he believed love did not require effort anymore. It was already there, steady and unbreakable. Or so he thought. He began to measure time differently. A quick call replaced long conversations. A short visit replaced shared meals. Promises were made with good intentions and broken without notice. He told himself it was temporary. She noticed the change long before he did. She heard it in the pauses between his words, saw it in the way his eyes wandered during visits, felt it in how quickly he stood up to leave. She understood that his life was becoming something she was no longer part of. Still, she did not complain. She reminded herself that this was the price of raising a strong child. Eventually they walk away. But deep inside, a quiet worry began to grow. Not about herself but about time. Old misunderstandings remained untouched. Small disagreements from the past were never discussed. Apologies that could have healed old wounds stayed locked behind pride and silence. He believed there would always be another chance. But she began to sense that chances were running out. Her body felt weaker now. Mornings were harder. Nights felt longer. She found herself thinking more about the past, about choices she had made, people she had lost, words she had never spoken. She started organizing things slowly, sorting memories, holding on to certain objects a little longer, letting go of others. He did not notice. When she tried to talk about these things, he grew uncomfortable. He changed the subject. He laughed it off. He told her not to worry so much. To him, these conversations felt heavy. To her, they felt necessary. There was tension between them, but it lived quietly. No arguments. No shouting. Just a growing gap filled with things neither of them said. He carried pride like armor. He believed he knew better. He believed there was still plenty of time to fix anything that mattered. She carried understanding like a burden. She saw the clock moving faster than he did. And with that understanding came a sadness she never spoke aloud. In her eyes, he was still the boy she had raised. still capable of kindness, courage, and honesty. She believed in the man he could become, even when he struggled to see it himself. That belief was why she stayed gentle. That belief was why she waited. But time does not wait for belief. The fracture between them widened quietly. Not enough to be noticed at first. Not enough to cause alarm. Just enough to let important things slip through unnoticed. He assumed she would always be there. She knew better. And in that difference, the space between assumption and understanding, their story began to change in ways neither of them could undo. Her body had grown frail. Movements that were once effortless now came slowly, deliberately, as if she were measuring every ounce of strength left to her. Even in her weakness, she tried to appear calm, composed. But he noticed the subtle tremor in her hands, the quiet catch in her breath, the small sighs she tried to hide. It was during these final days that she spoke of it. The request. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She only looked at him with eyes that carried years of love, sacrifice, and quiet hope. And in those eyes he saw something he had not noticed before: urgency. Her words were soft, fragile, almost whispered, but they carried the weight of everything she had kept inside. It was not about money, not about objects, not about favors. It was about truth, healing, closure. Something personal, something that could not be postponed, something that mattered more than anything he had ever thought. He heard it, but he did not understand it. He felt discomfort, like cold water poured over his certainty. He shifted in his seat. He looked away. He thought about deadlines, meetings, obligations, anything to distract him from the weight of the moment. She noticed his unease. Her smile was faint, knowing. She did not scold him. She did not demand. She only let him off the hook one last time, hoping he would choose to return before it was too late. "I'll handle it later," he whispered. Not to her exactly. Not even to himself. But it was enough to convince him he had time. She nodded, and a shadow passed over her face. Not disappointment, not anger, but quiet, fragile hope. He did not stay. He left her room with a sense of relief, as if carrying the weight of the request might have crushed him. He told himself he would come back. So, there was time. There always was. But time had already begun its quiet betrayal. Days passed, and he became busy with life again, the urgency of the request fading like smoke. Even as he glanced at her room from the doorway, even as he noticed how thin she had become, even as he caught the tremor in her hands, he told himself she would be all right. She was strong. She had always been strong. She could wait. And in that waiting he made the mistake that would haunt him forever. Because she could not wait. The house remained quiet after he left that day. No raised voices. No confrontations. Only the soft sound of her breathing, slow and deliberate, carrying a message he could not yet comprehend. In the moments after he walked away, she touched a small object on the table. A photograph, a letter, a keepsake, and held it close. It was part of the request she had made, something that connected her life to his in a way he did not yet see. She sighed, a deep, fragile sound, and closed her eyes, hoping he would understand. But he did not. The door closed behind him and life went on. Outside, the world continued in its steady rhythm. Cars honked, people laughed, the sun moved across the sky as if nothing had changed. Inside, a quiet hope lingered in a small, fragile body, waiting for a son who did not yet understand the cost of delay. It was a moment suspended between hope and regret. And he, unaware, stepped out of it entirely. He had made a choice. A choice to walk away believing there was still time. A choice that, in truth, would become his first regret. The morning was quiet, almost ordinary. The sun rose the same as it always did. The birds sang. The world carried on as if nothing had changed. But for him, everything had. The call came softly, almost like a whisper in the background of his busy life. Her voice was gone. The warmth that had filled her home, the rhythm of her presence, vanished. In its place was an emptiness that no amount of time, no amount of work could fill. He felt nothing at first. Not grief. Not shock. Just a hollow numbness, as if the air had been sucked out of the room he was standing in. He went through the motions. Arrangements, calls, faces blurred in a haze. He moved as if on autopilot, checking off boxes, ticking deadlines, completing tasks. But underneath it all, a slow, heavy ache began to build. And then it hit him. Her request. The one he had postponed. The one he had promised to handle later. It came back with a sudden, cruel clarity. Not as words, but as a feeling, a pressing weight on his chest, a whisper that would not be ignored. He remembered the look in her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands, the fragile hope she had placed in him. And he realized, with a jolt that made his stomach turn, that he had failed her. He should have acted. He should have listened. He should have stayed. But it was too late. The room she left behind felt different now. Not empty, too alive for that, but haunted. Her chair where she had sat. The small table where she had placed her keepsakes. The faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. Every detail spoke to him in a language he could barely bear to understand. And then he saw it. A photograph carefully placed on the table. A letter folded neatly as if waiting for him. A small object she had touched in her final days. It was part of her request, part of her life, part of what she had entrusted to him. And it was untouched, unopened, waiting. He reached for it, his hands shaking. For a moment he imagined picking it up, reading it, doing what she had asked. But he stopped. The reality of what he had done, or not done, was too heavy. The timing was gone, and with it the chance to make things right with her. Tears came then, sudden and hot. Not just for her but for himself. For the man he had been. For the choices he had made. For the silence he had allowed to grow between them. Regret settled in like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating. He wanted to scream. He wanted to turn back time. He wanted her back. But none of it was possible. All that remained was the hollow echo of her absence and the weight of the request he had ignored. The house, once filled with life, seemed to breathe with a quiet sorrow. And in that quiet, he understood something he had not yet admitted. Some moments do not come twice. Some words, once left unsaid, can never be reclaimed. He stayed there for a long time, unable to move, unable to think beyond the grief and the shame. Each second stretched endlessly, each breath heavy with the knowledge of what could never be undone. In that moment he realized the truth he had been avoiding for years. The cost of delay was not something abstract. It was real. It was permanent. And it would follow him for the rest of his life. Years passed. Life moved forward relentlessly, like a river that does not pause for grief. Outwardly he appeared fine, successful, busy, stable. People admired his work, his drive, the life he had built. On the surface, everything seemed complete. But inside, something had quietly cracked. Something small at first, then growing, spreading, until it filled every empty corner of his heart. He tried to bury it. He kept himself busy. Meetings, trips, responsibilities, they all became shields against the gnawing ache that would not leave. Sleep offered no respite. At night, he dreamed of her, her eyes searching his, her hands trembling, her quiet hope suspended in the air. Sometimes he woke in the dark, drenched in sweat, the memory of her final request pressing against his chest like a weight he could not lift. Even success brought no comfort. Every achievement felt hollow. Every praise, every milestone, every symbol of the life he had built for himself reminded him of what he had neglected. He began to notice the changes in himself. His heart hardened. His patience thinned. He kept people at a distance. Love became dangerous, fragile, something he could not risk fully anymore. The regret he carried had turned him inward, closed him off from the world in ways he barely recognized. His mother's memory was no longer warm. It had become a quiet shadow, always present, never offering comfort, only a reminder of promises unkept, opportunities wasted, time that could never be recovered. He found himself replaying moments in his mind, the visits he had rushed through, the conversations he had ignored, the weight of the request he had postponed. Each memory cut deeper than the last. Each memory left him feeling smaller, weaker, incomplete. He tried to distract himself with relationships, but even there he faltered. He could not open his heart fully. The lessons of his failure, the ghost of his mother's unspoken words, haunted every interaction. Friends, partners, colleagues, they sensed the distance he carried. He longed for connection, yet fear and shame held him back. The years stretched into a quiet routine, outwardly orderly, inwardly empty. Success became a mask. Ambition became armor. And beneath it all, the weight of one unanswered request settled deeper into his bones. He realized, sometimes too late in the quiet hours of the night, that life's rhythm had not paused for him to grieve, to reflect, to fix what had been broken. The world had kept moving, leaving him behind in a fog of his own making. And yet, in the shadows of that regret, there was a stubborn, silent awareness. He could not undo what had been done. He could not bring her back. He could not retrieve the time he had lost. All he had was the present, and even that felt fraught with guilt. Still, the memory lingered, demanding attention. Quietly, persistently, it whispered, "She had trusted you. She had hoped you would act. And you did not." For years, he lived like a man half awake, moving through life with one eye on the world, the other on the ghost of his own failures. He smiled when he had to. He succeeded when he could. But the emptiness never left. Some nights, he would hold the small object she had left behind, the letter, the photograph, the keepsake, and feel the ache of what could not be returned. His mother's request had become a shadow that stretched across every corner of his life, a quiet accusation that would not be silenced. The years of silence had taught him one thing: success does not heal regret. Achievements do not erase the past. And time once lost can never be reclaimed. Yet even in the heaviness, a spark remained, small, fragile, almost imperceptible. A memory of her hope. A whisper that perhaps one day he could face what he had avoided. But for now, the years of silence stretched on, and with each passing day, the weight of her absence and the echo of her request grew heavier, following him quietly, shaping him, reminding him of the cost of delay. He had long convinced himself that time would dull the ache, that life would fill the emptiness with enough distractions to keep the memory from pressing too hard. But the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. It began subtly. A photograph tucked into a drawer. A letter misplaced in a stack of papers. A reminder that seemed small at first, almost accidental, but carried an uncanny weight. He didn't notice it immediately. At first he told himself it didn't matter. Then the moment hit. He came across a box she had left behind. A collection of things he had never opened, never touched, and barely remembered. As he flipped through it, a photograph fell to the floor. A keepsake he had passed over countless times. But this time he paused. Something in it called to him, a memory, a feeling, a truth he had been avoiding. He unfolded a letter she had written. The handwriting was familiar, delicate, and careful, like every word had been chosen with precision and love. He began to read. And then he understood. The request she had made years ago, the one he had delayed, ignored, postponed, was not just important. It was urgent, essential. He realized that her words had been more than a favor or a task. They were a guide, a lesson, a way to heal a part of him she had known would be left broken if ignored. The weight hit him like a hammer to the chest. He saw clearly now what she had been asking, not for her benefit, not for closure in her own life, but for his. It was a request meant to shape him, to steer him toward truth, compassion, and understanding. And he had turned away. Guilt rose in waves, overwhelming and raw. Shame followed closely, whispering every detail he had tried to ignore. The years of avoidance, the moments of impatience, the silent dismissals, all of it replayed in his mind. He felt small, foolish, and unbearably late. The realization was cruel in its clarity. She had trusted him with something sacred, something deeply human, and he had failed. He wanted to call her, to apologize, to explain, to make it right. But she was gone. Gone forever. The room seemed to close in around him. Objects in the box felt like whispers from the past, accusing and pleading at the same time. The photograph, the letter, the keepsake, they all bore witness to his delay, to his mistakes, to the life he had lived without confronting what truly mattered. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of it. Not just grief but shame. Not just loss but accountability. The past had come back, relentless, and it would not be ignored. He realized something terrifying. Time had passed, yes, but the lesson she had tried to teach him had never gone away. It had waited, patient and persistent, until he was forced to face it. And now he could not turn away. The request's true purpose had been revealed, and with it, a choice appeared before him. Continue living in guilt and silence, or act despite the impossibility of changing what had already been lost. The spark that had lingered through years of emptiness flared. He understood, painfully, that honoring her request would not undo the past. It could not bring her back. But it could shape him. It could reclaim something of the man she had believed he could be. And for the first time in years, he felt movement in his chest, a mix of fear, shame, and the faintest flicker of hope. The past had refused to stay buried. And now so had the truth. He could not escape it. The weight of regret pressed down on him, heavy and unrelenting, a shadow that seemed to fill every corner of the room, and every corner of his mind. He replayed everything step by step as if his memory were a movie he could not pause or stop. The visits he had rushed through, the calls he had ignored, the words he had left unsaid, they all played again cruelly in vivid detail. Each choice he had made, each moment he had postponed, now stood before him like witnesses to his failure. He saw himself clearly now, not the man he wanted to be but the man he had become. Prideful, distracted, distant. Hardened by ambition, by fear, by the belief that time was on his side. And he saw her, The mother who had given everything for him, who had hoped, who had waited patiently, and who had trusted him in a way he had never fully understood. He understood it now. The request she had made in her final days, it was more than words. It was a bridge she had tried to build between them, a chance to heal old wounds, to mend the quiet fractures of their relationship. But he had walked away. He had let it fall through his fingers like sand, thinking there would always be more time, always another chance. And there was not. The realization hit like a blow. His chest tightened. His stomach lurched. Guilt and shame intertwined, choking him in ways he had never felt before. He felt small, exposed, a child again, but one who could no longer be comforted, no longer be forgiven by the one whose love had shaped him. He thought of her patience, her quiet sacrifices, the way she had carried him through life without complaint. And he saw for the first time the cost of his pride, his fear, his distance. The moments he had taken for granted, the opportunities he had ignored, the love he had assumed would always wait. He felt the full weight of it now, her absence, his failures, the request left unanswered. It pressed into him from every side, an invisible force he could not escape. And in that weight he began to understand something deeper. This was not just regret for missing a task or failing a promise. It was regret for who he had become. The man who had chosen convenience over courage, distraction over presence, pride over love. He sat in silence, replaying her words that he had long forgotten, her eyes that had searched his for understanding, her hands that had trembled as she entrusted him with something sacred. Every detail stabbed at him with the precision of memory. Every small gesture reminded him of what he had lost. And then came the fear that he would never forgive himself, the fear that this regret would define the rest of his life, the fear that he would carry this burden alone with no hope of relief. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break something, to vent the anger and shame that churned inside. But nothing changed the truth. The choice had been made. The chance had passed. The request remained unanswered and she remained gone. Tears came slowly at first, then in waves. He let himself feel what he had avoided for years. The grief he had kept at bay surged forward. But beneath it, beneath the sorrow and shame, there was a strange clarity. He understood the truth she had tried to teach him. The request had been about him, about shaping him into the man she believed he could be. And the failure was not just in what he had done or not done for her, but in how he had failed himself. For the first time in years he faced the full scope of his failure. And for the first time he began to see a path forward, not to erase the past, not to bring her back, but to honor the lesson she had left behind. The weight of regret had reached its peak. It threatened to crush him entirely. But in that pressure, in that unbearable heaviness, he began to feel something else, the possibility of choice. The understanding that he could not undo the past, but he could act in the present. The realization was terrifying. Acting now would be difficult, humbling, even painful. But doing nothing had already proven unbearable. And so, amid the crushing weight of guilt and grief, a flicker of resolve began to emerge. He could no longer ignore the request. He could no longer run from the consequences of his choices. The reckoning had arrived. And he had no choice but to face it. He stood at a crossroads. Not a crossroads in the streets or on a map, but one carved into the very center of his soul. One path led to continued silence, to burying the past under busy days and distractions, to letting guilt fester quietly for the rest of his life. The other path, far more difficult, demanded action, humility, and courage. It demanded that he confront what he had ignored, face the truth of his failure, and honor a promise he could no longer deliver to her. The choice was terrifying. He thought of all the years he had spent running from this moment, the walls he had built around his heart, the pride that had kept him from seeing her need, the fear that had convinced him there was always more time. Could he really face it now? Could he really step into the pain he had avoided for decades? For a long time he simply stood there, paralyzed. His mind replayed everything. The visits he had cut short, the calls he had skipped, the letter he had left unopened, the photograph he had passed by. Every memory felt alive, accusing, demanding attention. Every heartbeat carried her absence. And then, slowly, painfully, he began to understand something he had never seen before. The request had never been for her alone. It had been for him. It was never about completing a task, checking a box, or fulfilling a simple favor. It was about teaching him something deeper, about presence, empathy, compassion, humility, and the courage to face what is hard. It was about shaping the man she believed he could be, even when he had failed to see it himself. The truth hit him like a wave, sharp and cold. Acting now could not bring her back. It could not undo the past. But it could change him. It could honor the essence of what she had left behind. And for the first time in years, he felt movement in his chest, a stirring of purpose, fragile but undeniable. The other path, the one of avoidance, was easier. He could continue living in silence, hiding behind work, distractions, and excuses. But he knew deep down that choosing it would mean surrendering to guilt for the rest of his life. The weight he had carried would grow heavier with each passing year, a silent torment he could never escape. He had already learned that lesson too well. So, with trembling hands and a heart full of fear, he took a step toward the harder path. Step by step, he began to acknowledge what he had ignored, to recognize the lessons in her request, to confront the man he had become, the man he had promised himself he could be, and the man she had always believed he could be. It was not a decision made lightly. Every step forward felt heavy. Every memory pressed against him. Every emotion, grief, guilt, shame, longing, crowded his chest until it almost became unbearable. But he kept moving, because he understood now that the request, left unanswered for so long, still had power. Power to guide him. Power to change him. Power to shape the life he had yet to live. And so he made the choice. Not to erase guilt, not to reclaim lost time, not to bring back what was gone, but to honor love. To honor the woman who had given everything and asked so little. To honor the lessons embedded in her final words. For the first time he felt a fragile kind of hope. Not relief. Not absolution. But the sense that he was finally walking toward something real, something meaningful. The choice had been made. The path was hard, uncertain, and demanding. But he no longer feared it. Because at last he understood that running from guilt was no longer an option. And facing it, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. The first step was the hardest. He held the letter, the photograph, the small object she had left behind, each one heavy with memory and meaning. They were fragile things, but they carried her hope, her trust, and the final piece of her love that he had once taken for granted. He did not rush. He could not. Each action demanded care, humility, and reflection. This was not a checklist. It was a journey into the depths of what he had avoided, into the truth of who he was and who he could still become. He started with small gestures, visiting places she had loved, tending to her belongings, speaking to people she had cherished. Each act felt awkward at first, heavy with guilt, but slowly, it began to awaken something within him. For the first time in years, he felt his heart open, a little at first, then wider. The weight of regret remained, but it became sharper, more precise, guiding him rather than crushing him. Each step forward was both painful and liberating. He spoke with old friends, relatives, and neighbors who had known her. He listened to their stories, the little details he had never bothered to learn, the memories that brought her life into focus. He realized that her world had been far larger, far more profound, than he had ever understood. And through these stories he began to see the full measure of her sacrifice, her wisdom, her love. There were obstacles, resistance. Some people questioned why he had waited so long. Others doubted his sincerity. And within himself, doubt and shame rose like storms, threatening to undo every effort. But he persisted. He acted not to erase the past, he could not, but to honor it. Not to reclaim lost time, there was none, but to allow her legacy to shape him. Each act of fulfillment brought clarity, a slow illumination of who he could become if he allowed the lessons she had given him to guide him. He began to feel her presence in unexpected ways, in quiet moments of reflection, in the smile of a stranger, in the laughter of children playing nearby. Her hope, once fragile, now flowed through his actions, ripple by ripple, shaping the world around him. And with each step he felt a strange, humble peace. Not relief, not absolution, but the deep sense of purpose that comes when you finally honor what truly matters. He realized that redemption was not a single moment or a grand gesture. It was found in persistence, in consistency, in the willingness to face shame, guilt, and grief while still choosing to act. It was found in transforming the weight of regret into fuel for good, into lessons lived rather than ignored. He made decisions he had once feared, speaking openly about his failures, asking for forgiveness where it could still be given, embracing vulnerability instead of hiding behind pride. Each action was small, sometimes uncomfortable, but it carried the echo of her wisdom and the imprint of her love. In the process he felt change ripple through him. His heart grew more compassionate. His mind became clearer. His relationships deepened, not because they erased the past, but because they were nourished by honesty, presence, and integrity. He understood now what the request had truly meant. It was never about the act itself. It was about transformation, about becoming the man she had believed he could be. And in acting, Late as it was, he finally stepped into that truth. Though her voice would never guide him again, though her hands would never touch his shoulder, though her presence was gone from the world, her influence had finally reached him fully. Her hope, her trust, her love, all had found a home in him, and through him they began to live on. For the first time in decades he felt alive in a new way, not because the past was undone, but because he had finally allowed it to teach him what it was meant to teach. Redemption was not perfect. It was not clean. It was not free of pain. But it was real. And in that reality he discovered something he had never believed possible. That love, even delayed, even taken for granted, could still guide, still heal, still shape a life. He was finally honoring her request, not to erase regret, but to transform it. Not to bring her back, but to bring her wisdom forward. Not to undo the past, but to create meaning from it. And in doing so he began to find peace. The change did not happen overnight. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the small corners of his life. He noticed the way he spoke to people now, with patience, with listening, with care. He saw the moments when he could pause and truly be present, instead of rushing forward to the next obligation. His relationships began to shift. Friends, colleagues, even casual acquaintances responded differently to him. Not because he tried to impress them, but because he had learned to meet them honestly, with empathy that had been missing for years. He became aware of his own children, or the younger people in his life, seeing in them the same fleeting moments he had taken for granted with his mother. He began to listen more, to teach through presence, not just words, to give attention freely without expectation, because he understood at last what she had given him. The gift of care, patiently offered, quietly unconditional. Old resentments that had once occupied his mind began to lose their grip. He forgave himself, not entirely, not completely, but enough to act without fear of shame paralyzing him. He understood that redemption was not perfection. It was presence, action. Love that continues even after loss. Through these small acts, he began to break patterns he had inherited, and perhaps unconsciously repeated, patterns of avoidance, of distance, of silent regret. He realized that healing was not only about honoring his mother, it was about honoring those still alive, the living who needed him now. In family gatherings he spoke openly about the importance of connection, about remembering to cherish loved ones, about the quiet requests that, if ignored, can become lifelong regrets. He shared her wisdom, her love, and in doing so, her influence extended beyond the grave, shaping the hearts of others. Even strangers felt the ripple. Acts of kindness, gestures of thoughtfulness, the patience he now carried in daily interactions, they spread outward, touching lives in ways he could not have imagined. Her legacy lived not only in memory but in action. He felt it most deeply when he looked in the mirror. For the first time in years he recognized himself, not the man burdened by guilt, not the man hardened by avoidance, but someone capable of growth, of love, of honesty. The weight of regret had not disappeared, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it reminded him, gently, of the lessons he had learned and the person he could still become. In breaking the cycle of silence and avoidance, he began to heal. And in healing, he discovered a profound truth. Love, once honored, continues to ripple forward, far beyond the moments when it was first given. Her request, delayed though it had been, had found its purpose. Through him, it shaped the living, strengthened connections, and planted seeds that would flourish in ways he could not yet see. And for the first time in decades he felt that quiet, deep peace, the sense that even though he could not change the past, he could create a present and future filled with meaning, love, and presence. The lessons of her life, her sacrifices, and her final request had finally found their way into his actions. And in those actions she lived on. He sat alone in the quiet of the evening, the house bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Shadows stretched across the floor, gentle and familiar, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to remember, not just the pain but the love that had always been there. He thought of her, the woman who had given everything, quietly, patiently, without complaint. Her hands, worn and strong, that had carried him through childhood. Her eyes, always full of hope, that had searched for the best in him long before he could see it himself. Her voice, soft but unwavering, that had guided him even when he had refused to listen. He remembered the request she had made in those final days, the fragile hope that had rested on his shoulders. He had walked away then, blinded by pride, ambition, and the belief that there would always be more time. That mistake had carved a scar into his life, a scar that had followed him for years, shaping who he had become, teaching him the hard truth that some chances are fleeting, some words unspoken, and some requests are really final goodbyes in disguise. And yet, despite the delay, despite the mistakes, despite the years of silence, he had acted. Not to undo the past, he could not, but to honor her, to honor the lessons embedded in her love, to honor the essence of what she had asked of him. He understood now that her request had never been just about her. It had been about shaping him into the person she believed he could be. It had been about teaching him presence, empathy, courage, and honesty. And through acting, through embracing that lesson even too late, he had found a path forward. The house, once filled with echoes of regret, now felt warmer. Not because the past had changed, but because he had changed. He had carried her wisdom into his life, into the lives of others, into the way he loved and listened, into the way he lived fully in the present. He knew he would still feel the ache of what he had lost. Regret would always linger, a quiet shadow at the edges of memory. But it no longer controlled him. It no longer defined him. It had become a teacher rather than a prison. He thought of the ripple she had started, the lives she had touched through him, the love that now extended beyond her absence, the lessons carried forward by every small act of presence, care, and compassion. He realized that love, once honored, never truly dies. It transforms, it grows, it continues. He closed his eyes and let himself feel the fullness of it all, the sorrow, the love, the regret, the growth. And in that moment he whispered a quiet thank you, not to erase the past but to honor it. Not to reclaim what was lost but to carry it forward. Some requests come softly, almost unnoticed. Some moments pass without fanfare, and some words are spoken only once. His mother's request had been all of those things. But he had learned its meaning at last. And in learning he had found a form of peace, fragile yet profound, shaped by love, loss, and the courage to face himself. He opened his eyes and looked around the room at the photographs, the keepsakes, the echoes of her life. She was gone, yet everywhere. She lived on in the lessons, the love, and the choices he now carried forward. Regret remained, but it no longer held him captive. He had finally listened. He had finally acted. And in doing so, he had finally understood that love, even when delayed, still has the power to shape life, to heal, and to endure.